Hi guys, just before we start the episode today, whatever platform you are listening to this on, whether it be on the podcast, Apple Podcast, YouTube, whatever it is, please support it. Please like, subscribe, whatever you can do. Want to reach as many people as possible. So please do that and we'll get right into the episode. Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback Podcast. Today and in this episode, we have Vanessa, aka the Grateful V, and we're going to find out why the Grateful V later on. I was just talking to Vanessa about that before we got into the episode, so we'll talk a little bit about that. But in terms of her story, unfortunately, has a familiar feeling to it. Diagnosed with not just one, but multiple chronic illnesses. And after living with debilitating symptoms that these illnesses produced, she began to lose all hope and believe she would be like this forever. However, she decided to change the narrative and she decided she couldn't accept this as her future and put her faith into her own mind's ability to heal her body. Spoiler alert, it worked. She now dedicates her time helping others in similar situations and making sure they don't have to go through the same pain and suffering that she had to go through. So thank you so much for coming on. And I love these brain retraining stories because it's something that I'm getting there, trying to get the enthusiasm to like go into it myself and like not just go into it, but fully commit and immerse myself into it, which I know is so important. But thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. That was like the best introduction I think I've ever had. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Cool. Well, look, let's if you could take us back to the start. So I read up about your story and, mentioned it was over a decade. So could you take us back before that time? Like, how was your health before that? How was life before that? Could you just give us a little bit of detail of that and then lead us into the initial part of the story?
Yeah. So as a child, I had a really good upbringing. My family was very supportive. I was loved. I'm Greek, so we had like big fat Greek wedding style life. So, like everybody was always together. So I never lacked in love or support, which was amazing. But there were some moments in my childhood where I did have, surgeries, where I had anxiety. I dealt with a couple of things. But those were just things we dealt with and I just kind of forgot about. So they were as a result of like some traumatic events that we went through. So into my teen years, again, there were some hints of something going on that I was struggling with, but I just kept pushing through. I dealt with an eating disorder. I struggled with anxiety and depression. But again, I just pushed through. And I got into my adult years, and I think this is when I thought I was thriving the most. And I excelled. I was the top of my class in criminology at university. I was dead set on, getting into law enforcement, getting into, a job that felt rewarding, that could help other people, but that also gave me some sense of power and identity. And so right like fresh out of university, I landed a job in law enforcement. And one of my functions was to air marshal criminals back home. So at that time, I was fit, I was strong, I was healthy. Well, what my definition of healthy was back then was I looked good, I could go out and party, I could work 7 days straight and then also hit the bar after work.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how I felt. I was unstoppable. I felt limitless. I was at like the top of my game. I had an amazing boyfriend who eventually became my husband. We just bought a house. I was making really good money for someone who just came out of college. So for me, I felt like I was on top of the world. And, I didn't have really much chronic symptoms at that point, but eventually, and I'll tell you what happens next, but that's kind of how I was. That's what my life was. I didn't really have limitations. I would travel the entire world without fear. And this was just who I was, and I never gave it a second thought.
Really interesting that a lot of people that I interview seem to be that kind of person, that achiever, personality. Really, I talk about it quite a lot. Like, I just pushing myself in every area of my life, like not just at work, but at the gym, and at sport, and then also at the bar. And
Yeah.
I would always be the extreme in every single. I would get
Yes.
in the earliest at work. I'd leave the latest. I'd be the last person out of the bar. I would run the most in a football game, and just everything had to be the most. And I don't think it's a coincidence that people like us tend to get sick.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Could you take us through? So when was it? You said so you were in your, like, I guess, your graduate job.
Yeah.
Living the dream. At what point did you notice something wasn't quite right, and then
Okay.
and what was going on there?
So my chronic illness journey started when I had traveled to Southeast Asia. I went to the Philippines and Vietnam within a few weeks of each other for work, and I contracted a deadly parasite. I didn't know I had it, but when I came back upon return, and I mean, I was always traveling. So it's like I did Philippines, Vietnam, then went to British Columbia for 2 weeks for training. It was just, nonstop. And I started to notice that my body wasn't able to keep up with that pace. All these weird, obscure symptoms I've never had before, like, indigestion issues, going to the bathroom a lot, feeling weak, tired, drained, headaches.
Mm.
And the symptoms, and I think that was in 2009 of like September, October. So I traveled in August. And I actually ended up leaving my training early. Something didn't feel right to me. I tried to push through when I got back home, but the symptoms just got weirder and worse. So by December, I had developed severe vertigo, dropped to the floor, can't see anything, went to the hospital multiple times. They're like, it was maybe just an ear infection or whatever, treated with antibiotics, put you on anti-nausea meds. I was also, right before that, I started having breathing issues. I don't have asthma. I used to be able to run 20 kilometers a day. I couldn't even walk up the stairs. So I kept going to the hospital saying, I can't breathe. Everything looks fine. There's nothing wrong with you. It's anxiety. Your wedding's coming up. You're this, and this. So they would give me Ativan and other antidepressants. And I didn't know any better at that point. So I took them. And then that just snowballed into just worsening of symptoms where I stopped working completely. My fiance, we have this new home. We couldn't even pay the mortgage. It was a struggle because I suddenly stopped working. And I kept going to doctors. I can't even tell you how many second and third and fourth opinions I kept getting, and they all said everything looks fine. And it wasn't until I spoke with a person in tropical disease medicine, and when she said, I think I know what you have. And long story short, they found the parasite that I have, which had like a 70% death rate. And it was like weeks before my wedding. And they're like, you need to do chemotherapy to get rid of it. This is, deadly. I remember getting that call, like, are you sitting down? You need to come down here. And I actually ended up having 3 different parasites at the same time, but one of them was the one that was deadliest, and that finding, and she told me, I remember, she's like, don't Google it, whatever you do. And so I listened because, and had I Googled it back then, I think I would have had an even worse time, because now looking back, I realized that this parasite pokes holes in your lungs, hence the breathing issues. It gets into your brain, like affects your neurological symptoms, wreaks havoc on your digestive, and then gets into your bloodstream and affects, like, my iron levels were low, like everything wasn't working as it should. So I find out what I have weeks before my wedding. I do this really potent, like, chemotherapeutic treatment. They're watching my liver, they're watching everything. They're telling me I might lose my hair before my wedding day. And it is just too much. And it was devastating to me. So thankfully, I reacted okay with the treatment. I did have a lot of nausea. I made it to my wedding day. but because of the chemo, I was so nauseous, I couldn't partake, so I spent like 75% of the night in the bridal suite, like hugging the toilet, right? And my husband, he was out there with the guests trying to explain, where did your wife go? Where is Vanessa? Right? And it was devastating. And after that diagnosis, and after we kind of treated it, things just never got better. So I was diagnosed with post-infectious IBS. I was diagnosed with a chronic migraine developed after that. And so in a span of like the next 8 to 10 years, I was diagnosed with like a multitude of things, from vestibular issues, Meniere's disease, small fiber neuropathy, POTS syndrome, dysautonomia, chronic migraine, hemiplegic migraine. I had they had glaucoma, just like everything that you can think of. I suddenly had this long list of things that were wrong with me. And it seemed like every year I would, maybe even every month, there was something would change and it would just get worse. So over that course of those years, I suffered 2 concussions as well from like fainting. I got 8 stitches on my lip a month before my wedding from passing out and hitting the tub. It was just like, I just felt, I'm like, God, what did I do to deserve this? And that's how I felt. I felt like such a victim going through all of this. I was lucky enough to carry 2 beautiful children and give birth to them during this time. Pregnancies were very difficult, but I couldn't take care of them. So my parents had to step in. My husband suddenly became a single dad taking care of 3 kids, because I became a kid again. So I needed to be fed. I needed to be showered. I needed to be driven around. I needed help, with day-to-day things, really. And it was quite devastating how one's parasite could really just change your life in such a drastic way. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of where it left me. And I think the worst I was in 2018, 2019, where I was like hospitalized for like a full month, and my husband was planning my funeral, and my parents came back from Greece, and because they were told I would not survive. So, I mean, saying goodbye to my kids, holding them, and not knowing if I'd be back home. So it got really bad, and it felt like the darkest place you could possibly be in. But then it got better. So I'll leave you at that.
Well, it's just like, if you weren't sitting there looking so healthy and clearly you have recovered and you have got better, I'd be feeling a bit emotional about that story. It was like, have you watched The Pursuit of Happiness before, where
I have.
where it just keeps getting worse, and you think it's going to
Yeah.
you think, oh, it's got to get better now, and it just gets worse, and it just gets
Yeah.
worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
That
That's
reminded me
how
of
it
that.
felt. Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's just like, oh God, that was
No.
great, crazy. So whenever you had this new diagnosis, like a new diagnosis, did you have this, like a renewed optimism, that not a renewed optimism, just like, oh, this could be it. This could be the thing that, turns the tide for me. Did you have that every time?
Every single time. Every single time. I know that feeling well, where you're like, they found it, like with the parasite. Yes. Oh my God, we have an answer. And then the treatment doesn't work. And then they're like, well, then it's this, and then it's that, and then it's this. And it was just this hopelessness
Mm.
and putting my faith in others to fix me, when it was only me who could heal myself, put it that way. Yeah.
And did you go down, it sounded like, at least initially, because you were having like medical treatment for the parasite, were you going down just that route, or were you looking at alternative things?
Maybe you and I can compare, because we might have the same amount. I tried like everything,
Mm.
like every osteopath, homeopath, naturopath, functional medicine doctor, chiropractor, acupuncture, Chinese medicine, every diet you can possibly think of, every supplement, um, neurologists, endocrinologists. I did gastroenterology. I had on my roster like 15 doctors. Um, so I did, Western medicine. I also tried everything else. I also did energy healing. I, tried Reiki. I did shamanic healing. I did other energy releases. I did, mediumship, psychics. Like I just needed to find out what the heck it was so that I could fix it and so that I could get better. So I literally tried, everything you could think of. Maybe not ayahuasca, um, but close to that, and every medication. So at the height of it, I think I was on a 12 daily prescription medications, plus like I can't even count how many supplements. So it was just like, constant popping of stuff all day long.
Did you feel like any of that medication made you worse at any point?
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it would help with one thing and then like start something else.
Mm.
Right. So especially with I don't know, the antidepressants, like they would help with one thing, but then they made certain other issues worse, or they would increase symptoms. It was a trial and error. Honestly, some of them, I will say, there is a place for medicine. There are life-saving medicines out there that do help and that do work, and I'm thankful for them. But I would say I like to use them as like training wheels to get us to like where we need to
Mm.
be, not like, hopefully not a lifelong thing, but there
Mm.
is a place for it. So I don't want to shame anyone who's on medication, because if you can be on medication and continue to heal, then that's okay too.
Yeah, definitely. I think this podcast, one thing it's taught me is that there are so many different ways to recover, and
Yeah.
it's just about finding what works for you. Unfortunately, when it's like me and you have to maybe try many different ways.
Everything. Yeah.
And I guess the problem with doing what me and you have done is that you are let down a lot, and every single time you're let down, it adds to that. And I'm not putting words in your mouth, but I'm assuming similar to me, it adds to that belief that I'm different. So it didn't work
Yes.
for me. There's something broken that they're not going to figure out, and I'm not going to be able to. And that's, I think, I've got someone was on the show, and they said it's an actual form of medical trauma that you have, and it builds up this belief and scar tissue essentially
Yes.
that means that, and that's a lot to overcome, and I'm still overcoming it, which is why I know I need the brain retraining stuff. Was that, I'm assuming you nodding your head means that
Yes.
that's true
Yeah.
for you. I mean, did you feel like,
every yeah,
yeah.
every single person on this journey has those belief systems in place,
Mm.
and it is a result of our experiences, right? Our past experience with the medical system. I had to do deep trauma work on my memories from interactions with the hospitals, with the doctors, because each one planted a seed in me, and then those beliefs became blocks to my healing.
Mm.
So again, these ideas that, well, I'm different, right? I'm too far gone. I'm too damaged. No one has this, this thing that I have. Mine's unique. They miss something, right? If there's something wrong they can't find, I need to keep searching. And these were constantly playing in the back of my head as this like unconscious programming. And then no matter how much work I would do on my end, if I didn't deal with that unconscious programming, with those core limiting beliefs, then I wasn't going to go anywhere. I'd kind of, circle back to where I was.
Mm.
So it's becoming aware of them, number one, that awareness, and saying like, oh, wait a second, this is a negative belief. Just because I believe it doesn't make it true. And then also asking yourself, what do I want to believe instead? And providing that evidence. Well,
Mm.
maybe I can heal. I've watched so many recovery stories on this podcast alone. If
Mm.
they can heal, why can't I?
Mm.
Right? If if I just keep showing up every day, then I can improve. Maybe I won't get to 100%, but isn't any improvement better than none? So it
Yeah.
was just this constant self-talk of reassuring myself. I also did a lot of like EFT tapping to, help with releasing these limiting beliefs. But I can tell you, I had those running rampant in my mind constantly, and I had to do a mindset shift. Otherwise, it was going to keep me stuck.
I have to say, in my situation compared to yours, I haven't had to have those constant diagnoses, because every single time you have one of those, that's a new identity to have to shake off, right?
Yeah.
And it's almost, and I don't want to say that this is what, but it's almost like a badge of honor, isn't it? It's like, oh, I am this sick. I have this many things, and it helps you buy into that. I don't say buy into it, but like, there's a lot of self-pity going on, isn't there? And that's not a bad well, it is a bad thing, but that's not a thing that people should be ashamed of or anything like that. We all have to go through that, but unfortunately, when you're in that spot, it's difficult to recover. I'm assuming you would agree.
Yeah, I mean, after you're getting constant diagnoses and sometimes being diagnosed for things that weren't even bothering you, and you're like, what do you mean I have this? I didn't come here for that. I came for this, right? Suddenly you have something new to add to the list. And there were times when I was in that victim mentality state, and I would, meet with other people who are in the same situation, right? I'd say misery loves company, but more like people who are going through a hard time want to be with someone who gets it. So, and then we would talk, oh, I got this today. Oh, I got this test done today. I'm doing this medication today. And it was just solidifying that pathway of sickness in our brains, and also solidifying this idea that we're victims. So you can have a diagnosis and not stay in a victim mode. You can come from a creator mode, from an place of empowerment, where you say, okay, I have this. It doesn't define me. And I'm going to keep trying until I can get better. I believe in hope. I believe that I can get better. Just because a doctor tells me I'll likely be bedbound for the rest of my life, which I was told. I was told I wouldn't be able to have kids. I was told I'd be bedbound. I was told I'd never work again. Just because they tell me these things doesn't mean I have to accept them as my truth, right? So it's taking the power back in your hands and choosing something better. And believing that it can happen, that you're deserving of it. And so I hope that answers your question.
No, definitely. And so, right, let's go back into the story. Sorry, I took you out of it. And you're at your darkest time. I think you said you were hospitalized for a month. Yeah. Can you take us through the bit of the story where it gets a bit lighter, and how did you come across what ultimately led you to where you are today?
Yeah. So, while I was in the hospital, and having these weird symptoms, I was diagnosed with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And so, in Toronto, it's a very rare condition to have. I know in the US, it's way more common. But there were no doctors who knew anything about it. I lucked out that my neurologist had like read it somewhere once, and he's like, I think I know what you have. And I'm thankful for his intervention, because initially he did put me on some medication that did help me enough to be able to leave the hospital alive. So I'm grateful for that. And like I said, there's a place for medicine. But while I was in the hospital, I started researching POTS and going like, what is this? I've never heard of this, right? And again, all these horrible stories, like these just devastating accounts, except for one. And it was this girl on YouTube, and her name is Sarah Jackson Panther, and she's really big in the Instagram community. She's amazing. Interview her if you get a chance.
Yeah, I know that name, but I probably messaged her. But
yeah, so she started a YouTube channel where she shared her healing journey with POTS, and I was like, that day a seed was planted, but I never really paid attention to it again, because I wasn't ready to hear that there was a way out.
Mm.
So I was really depressed, like really down. And at that point, I didn't want to live anymore. So it was like, what was the point of me trying something that may not work? So I just dismissed it as too good to be true. I let it go. And then, a few months later, about 6 months later, things got much worse. In that, like, I was, back at square one, even though I was on all these medications. And what was worse was my mental health just got, after at that point, like 8 years of good, constant struggle. It was just too much. And I was having those thoughts where please God, don't wake me up today. Like I would pray every night, please God, don't wake me up. Just let me go. Just let me go. And my parents obviously saw what I was struggling with. And I lived with them for a really long time because I couldn't take care of my kids. And at one point they said, hey, like, we're going to bring you to church and ask the priest to pray over you. And I was like, no, it's not going to work. I hate God right now. Like, what's the point? Right. Like I didn't believe he could do anything. And I remember that day they physically carried me into the church, and it was just like a regular, I think it was like a weekday afternoon. And they just placed me on the altar, and they, told the priest what was going on. And the priest, laid this like sash over me, and he started to pray. My parents started to pray. And then it was like everyone was crying at that point, like even me, because I had had enough. And so at that point, I feel like I either surrendered and just gave it to God for the first time and like said, okay, I'm done. I'm done. Take it. Like I can't anymore. And I'd love to tell you that everything changed at that point. It didn't, but there was like a glimmer of hope from like that day on. And that reignited my faith. So with that, I started to pray again. I started to say, hey, God, like you need to help me out, have these like really authentic talks with him where I yelled at him. I gave him whatever's on my heart. I sweared I did, because I was just struggling so much. And I started meeting our local priest regularly, and he would pray every week with me. He taught me to pray. And it was crazy because as I surrendered it to God, within like a week, no joke, that program that I saw in the hospital like popped up on my screen on my phone. That seed that was planted there came back around. And I was like, no way. Like I didn't talk about it. I didn't research, like my phone wasn't listening to me. Like there was no way. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And I said, maybe there's something to this. And so I went and bought the program. It was that first program I did was the Dynamic Neural Retraining System, DNRS.
Yeah.
I watched the DVDs. It took me 2 weeks to get through them, even though it's supposed to be 4 days, because, brain fog was just that intense. And it was the beginning of this, like, healing journey that coincided with my faith journey. So it was like they almost started at the same time, where I was started to believe in something bigger than myself, greater than myself. It gave me the sense of comfort where it's saying maybe it isn't all up to me. Maybe I didn't do anything wrong, and maybe I am deserving of healing. And then I slowly started to improve. I slowly started to rewire my brain and change my thinking, and symptoms got better. And it took a while. It wasn't like an overnight thing. I did, I think, DNRS for a good year, almost a year and a half. And at that point, I trained enough to be able to fly to Greece. I hadn't been in 10 years. And I went with my family. We had this amazing vacation. And it helped, took away all my POTS symptoms, like took away all dysautonomia type symptoms. I was able to get off so much medication, but it wasn't the end all be all for me. And the reason is because I had a past of a lot of trauma. I had a lot of emotions I was repressing, and I needed to deal with that. And so I discovered I had chronic daily migraine. So I had one of the worst cases in our city. It was about 25 to 26 migraines a month, like full blown. and I was in severe pain. So although the POTS was better and all that, I was dealing with this crazy pain. And that's when I discovered mind body work. So Dr. John Sarno, the Curable app, this idea that emotions can manifest in physical pain. And I committed to that, and then was able to rewire my pain pathways and get rid of pain. So it was a journey. I think everything I tried led me to something else. And then at that point, which wasn't too long ago, I was still at that point having traumatic memories surface that I had never thought of. So things I had forgotten. And those surfaced to heal. So, I mean, for me, that was a sign that my nervous system had calmed down enough to allow the trauma to come up to the conscious mind. And then for that, I did a lot of belief work and tapping to identify my core beliefs and rewrite my past memories so that they are no longer, influencing how I perceive the world and how I experience the world around me. So it's been a lot of things, and I feel like it's a neuroplasticity cocktail because there's so many things in it. But that's what it took for me, and I'm so grateful that I was able to be the one to do my healing instead of relying on everyone outside myself.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, there's a lot of whilst we we've been going through something very different physically and stuff, but there's I used to definitely rely on someone else figuring it out, doing the work for me, or some kind of medication doing the work for me, and I'd spend a hell of a lot of money, and still probably do, but like something that I did like stem cell treatment, and that was like so much money, but that was just like give me these stem cells to make me better, and I never thought that it could actually be the power of the brain to actually help you recover. What's interesting is that I had someone on, I haven't released the episode yet, but I had someone on talking about TMS.
Yes, that's it. Mind body syndrome.
John Sarno, and I'd previously had someone called Danny Fagan, and she came on
Yes.
to tell her story about that, and I read his book, and so I'm just trying to get it in my mind whether like what makes the most sense for me right now. Is it something like that or DNRS? And I guess DNRS makes a little bit more sense because it just feels like that's more around getting out of fight or flight and making yourself feel safe, whereas maybe the John Sarno thing is more about pain. Do you think you could use both at the same time, or you use one first?
I did.
Yeah.
So I did DNRS first because I needed to initially get myself out of that fight or flight, right? So that my limbic system was just freaking out constantly.
Yeah.
And so I don't think I would have been able to do the curable work had I not had that foundation. Mm-hmm. So when I did start the curable work, I continued the DNRS. So I kind of amalgamated the two programs into one. Because they can complement each other. Both programs talk about calming down the amygdala. They both talk about that stress response. The difference is they also both, say meditation is important, visualizations. Like they're both using many of the same principles, but with DNRS, there was no place for the emotional work. And so it was just like elevate your mood all day, right? Which is important when you're healing, but if there's trauma that needs to heal, sometimes that's not enough. And for some people, yeah, maybe it is enough. For me, it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And so curable it actually introduced me to journaling, but journaling in a directed way, because I thought I knew how to journal. No, I didn't. Mm-hmm. It was the journaling that helped me uncover the trauma, what helped me uncover the repressed emotions, allowed me to feel them, and taught me that it's okay to feel, that it is safe to feel my emotions, to process my feelings. Mm. And unfortunately, DNRS, I found, didn't allow for any of that, and I needed that. Mm. And so when I started Curable, I still continued my DNRS rounds, which are visualizations, but I also brought in Curable and talked about how, reminded my brain that feeling was safe and that I could feel and be okay. So you can do them both. And I mean, I think if you're to watch, for anyone watching right now, my best advice is to look at testimonial videos of all the programs. There's so many out there: DNRS, the Gupta, Curable, ANS Rewire, the lightning process. There's tons. And watch the testimonials, see if there's anyone that kind of fits like a similar story as yours, and see what resonates with you. And don't be discouraged if you try something and it doesn't fully heal you. Everything that you try will get you one step further. So nothing is ever wasted. But sometimes we need to try a couple things to see what works.
Yeah, I tried the Gupta program. And when I say I tried, I can't say I gave it my all. It just really didn't resonate with me, and I found it incredibly difficult. So I'm trying to think of that's why I'm thinking about DNRS, or just finding one that works for me a little bit more. It just felt really unreal, because there's like a part in it where anytime you get like this thought or any sort of negative thought, you have to get up and do this round. And I was just like, I'm working, because I still work, so I'm working all day. I've got to like consistently get up and go and do it, and it just wasn't realistic. Whereas I like the thought with DNRS, from what I know, you do your rounds in one go, or you split it up, but then that's it. You don't have to do stuff throughout the day. Is that right?
No.
Oh.
So DNRS also, it focuses very much on catching the POPs. POPs are like limiting beliefs, negative pathways of the past. And you're supposed to use techniques to divert your attention from them. So to change your emotional state. So for instance, if I'm working away on the computer and I suddenly don't feel well, then I might think, you're never going to get better. You're getting worse. Whatever you're doing is not working. Well, we have to catch that belief and change it. How? Well, there's many different exercises you can do. You can do like a quick, like I use tapping a lot, right? And just I put in my real belief, like maybe I am healing. This is just a sensation. It's safe. I'm safe. Or it could be putting on a song and elevating your mood. It could be something as simple as saying, hey, this is just my nervous system overreacting, like chill, buddy, So DNRS does, in order for it to be as effective, you do need to catch all of those things. Curable is not that way. Curable, I find, is better for those people who do have a busier life. The journaling is very, very helpful, and it's something that I think everyone can benefit from if you do it. I know a lot of people won't do it. And the wonderful thing about Curable is that it doesn't force you to say you have to do an hour a day. You could do pick 2 days in a week and say, I'm going to devote 2 hours to it today. And I'm going to get that in. And the other great thing is in the app itself, it has a lightning bolt emergency button. So when you're noticing a symptom amp up or pain, so every time I would get a migraine, I would hit that bolt and I would have all of these options to choose from on how to decrease that pain, all based in science. And they were wonderful. And that's what helped me rewire that pathway, right? So try it out. Again, it's trial and error. I know the belief work and catching your thoughts is a very important part to healing. So no matter how much meditation we can do and how much visualizations and that, we still need to deal with those thoughts, that programming that's going on in our brains, because that's what's ruling our lives.
Yeah. I mean, there's even a limiting belief in me that I can do that. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I actually, when I did the Joe Dispenza retreat, and I was really struggling with the meditation all week, and I was like, it just doesn't really work on me. And then he just said, literally as I was thinking that, he just said to the crowd, he goes, I know there's some of you out there that are thinking this doesn't work for you. And he was like, don't think you're too special, that that would only not work for you. And I was just like, that
exactly
made me laugh. I was just like, who am I to think I'm this special person that's just crazy thing wrong with me?
That's very common. And we all, honestly, that is probably one of the most common limiting beliefs that I see
Mm,
in the chronic illness community, is
mm,
that it worked for her, but it won't work for me. Or
yeah.
this person's smarter. She did it better. I'm not doing it right. It's why isn't it working? Like, it's that constant internal chatter that sets you back. But the key to all neuroplasticity and brain retraining is consistency. That is the key. If you
Mm,
keep showing up and doing the practice, your brain has no choice but to change. No choice. It's
mm,
that repetition, that consistency, but also that belief,
mm.
believing that what you're doing is going to work.
Yeah, which I guess is cultivated through consistency as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Could you just tell us, like, in terms of your life now, and I know you had to go through a horrible period of your life to get to where you are at now. Are there ways in which your life is better now as a result of what you've been through compared to, let's say, you'd gone on and lived that, that life you were living before? Like, how's your life, if it is better?
It's very different. I'm not the same person I was
Mm,
prior to getting sick. I don't feel like I resemble her at all. I'm just a better version and more authentic version of myself because I was able to strip the trauma, the distractions, these false identities, these masks that I was kind of wearing to survive,
mm,
and get back to who I am at my core and at my roots. Um, I, I'm able to, I'm more grateful for very simple things in my life,
mm,
like being able to walk down a flight of stairs. Like, we just moved and my previous house had like one floor. And I kept saying, I'm like, oh, thank God we bought this house because I wasn't able to walk in the past. I would have to crawl everywhere. And so now I'm like, little things like I'm able to move into a house with like a really tall staircase and I run up and down like constantly. I'm able to cook again. I'm able to enjoy my kids, be in the moment and present. I'm able to work again. I'm able to help others.
mm,
My whole 10 years have been people helping me. And
mm,
so this was my opportunity to be able to give back. And I think had I stayed on that pattern and that pathway and maybe not gotten that parasite and not gotten sick, then I think I would have been leading myself down a very destructive path, because I could see it like as I look back.
yeah.
And so I'm grateful for this. I feel like it humbled me, but I also think it helped me to see what is important in my life, and also has given me the gift to not go back to my past ways. So everybody's eager to get well and to heal so that they can return to what they were doing before.
Mm,
But that is not like healthy. It's not the right thing to do. This teaches us something. There's a lesson in this. If I were to go and go 90 for nothing every single day, push myself through things, never rest, not give myself the time or the feel like I was worthy of taking time for myself. If I stopped working on myself, eating healthy, doing this stuff, then I'd probably end up somewhere close to where I was before.
mm.
So it's a really, really great, eye opener, right? To be able to say, oh, I know what got me here, and I'm going to choose better now because I know better now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so many gifts that came with this.
I almost think that if I'd recovered within a couple of years, I would have just, that wasn't enough time for me, like, because I wouldn't have learned my lessons, and I needed a longer time to not go back and make those same mistakes. Because if someone had just given me that gift back again, I would have just gone and made the same mistakes like straight away. Um,
Yes,
so
yes.
yeah, I think we're on the same. Yeah, we're definitely on the same wavelength in that respect. Um, Finally, just I'd like to ask you about, like, someone going through like a really tough time at the moment, perhaps at their darkest hour, like you were in the hospital that one time. Not really, they haven't got the faith that you ended up getting. Like, what would be your advice to them at the moment, like going through that tough time?
I would say that, don't allow your diagnosis to define your future. I would say that just because somebody tells you you can't do something, it doesn't mean that's true. If I were to listen to everything the doctors told me, I wouldn't have been here. I would have accepted defeat. It can always get better. Life is never going to be perfect, but if you commit to your healing, commit to yourself, take on some sort of program or whatever protocol that you think that you can do, just give it your all and believe that you can heal, right? It doesn't, and like you said yourself, there's nothing so special about you that you can't heal.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I mean, that just hold on to that hope. It's always there. And if you need me, I mean, I pride myself in throwing out hope ropes to everyone around me because I needed one and someone threw it to me. And so I'm just passing on the buck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be honest, I don't like hearing about people being sick for so long, but it does give me, whenever I hear these kinds of stories, it just gives me so much hope and just so much inspiration that someone could feel so broken and feel like, how could I don't want to count the number of things that were wrong with you. I've got all of these diagnoses, impossible for me to reverse all that. And then you're in the position you're in today. And thank you so much for coming on and telling your story.
You're so welcome.
If people wanted to connect with you, people wanted to reach out to you, how would they go about doing
that? Instagram is probably the best way. I'm pretty active on there. I also have a website, thegratefulbee.com.
Yeah.
And I'm also on Facebook. So either of those, it's pretty easy to connect. You can DM me, and I'm actually hoping to launch some live classes coming up soon to be able to share some of the stuff with you guys. And for those who can't afford one-on-one coaching, or for those who are on a waiting list, because I do have one at this time. So I'm just willing to share as much as I can with you guys, because I know how hard this is.
Awesome. Thank you so much for thank you so much for coming on and sharing that. And you've brightened up my Friday for sure. So I'll go into this weekend with renewed optimism. And thank you so much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. I appreciate it. Thank you for asking me to come on, because I love to share and to connect with others. So it's honestly my honor.